Hey, welcome to Untold. Untold exists for one reason: to surface what doesn't make it into the press releases. The real decisions, the real costs, the things that the leader knew but couldn't say out loud. Today's guest has spent more than 2 decades helping people break through what holds them back. He's written a book, just released, about what it actually costs to lead. The invisible game that runs underneath every metric, every board meeting, every payroll cycle. Josh Christopherson is the CEO of Achieve Today, an EdTech company based in Utah that's helped over 150,000 people across 72 countries. He's built one of the most decorated workplace cultures in the state. Today, we're not here to talk about what he built as much as we're here to talk about who he had to become to survive building it, and what he had to let go of to write a book called CEOs and Suicide. Josh, welcome to Untold.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it. Thanks for the introduction.
Yeah, we can't wait to hear more about your journey. And one of the things we talked about when we were setting this up was we wanted to focus on your personal journey, your kind of development of your leadership through your time at Achieve Today. You've been there almost 2 decades. You've been CMO, CRO, and now CEO. I'm wondering, what's one thing that had to change the most for you to be successful in those different roles?
You know, I think one of the biggest things that had to change, you have to change yourself. And a lot of it comes to the beliefs of what you can and can't do as a leader. And like you mentioned, I started in this education space. It's actually almost 25 years ago, and was able to go through a lot of different roles during that time. Probably after the first 13 years, that's where I moved more into the executive side of the business, and that's where the biggest jump was, because that's where you have to change your mindset from, I'm here to, focus on my responsibilities and, the revenue that's generated for the company, specifically from what I personally do and how I contribute to my team. And I played in different management positions in sales and different things like that. But when you move up into some of those corporate, more of the executive level positions, you really have to shift your mindset from me to we, and what are we all doing here together, and what are we looking to accomplish? And so that was a big thing, from the very start.
Mm-hmm. Me to we. That's a great way to put it. You've got a background in flying and in aviation. Um, the title of your book is CEOs and Suicide: The Invisible Game of Leadership. When did leading the company start to feel less like flying in visual and more like flying with instruments? Like, when did you become of the invisible parts of the leadership game?
Yeah, you know, it's a deep question, because as I look back at my career and the different positions that I've held, I never really saw myself in this position. This wasn't something that I that I really was ever interested in, being the CEO and taking on those responsibilities. In fact, early on, the positions that I held, I was able to, at least some of the later ones, I was able to sit directly with the CEOs that we had hired. And as one of the owners of the company, my partner and I, initially when we started Achieve Today specifically, that was about 13 years ago. And at the very beginning of it, our goal was to hire a CEO, right? We wanted to hire, you always hear, you want to get the right people on the bus, Jim Collins, right? From Good to Great, get the right people on the bus and then get them in the right seats. And we never really looked at ourselves as being the people who were going to take the company, to the moon, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we started out hiring CEOs, and I remember, doing those interviews and bringing them on. We went through 2 prior CEOs before my partner asked me to take over as CEO, and that was another interesting conversation. But I will say, to go back to your question, there were times where I had the opportunity to sit with some of these CEOs that we hired and watch them deal with the challenges of building and growing the business and the ups and downs that we would go through. And I had the opportunity to sit in one-on-one conversations where they were struggling and where they were going through some really difficult times and belief in themselves, which was interesting because, we hired them because they seemed to be the people that, did this. They were these high-level executives. And, I think where I started to realize that's where I started to notice that there's a lot more uh, going on with the inner game than the outer game. And that's how we appear on the outside versus how, the game that's going on inside each of us. And, I can look back to a specific time. I actually brought this up in the book, and a specific time where I was sitting in one of the previous CEO's offices, and we were going through a very difficult time. There's always ups and downs with every business, and it had gotten so difficult that he had brought me in and said, "Josh, I think I need to bring in all of our teams today and tell them that we need to let them go. We need to close the doors because we're not going to be able to make payroll next week." And he said, I can't ask them to come back to work tomorrow knowing that there's no way we're going to make it. And I remember, I mean, you can imagine sitting in a room like that, one on one, with this person that you've hired to handle these things. And I just thought to myself, this we can do this. We can figure it out. I know we have what it takes. We've got the right people. And we did. I left his office and I went and did some different things and had some ideas and figured out some ways to help us really make it happen in the next couple days, the end of the week, and here we are. That was probably 8 or 9 years ago now, and we made it through it. But I think it goes back to your question. There's a lot of different times that I experienced in this journey. Some of them, many of them, before I even was asked to take the role as the CEO of the business, where I was able to recognize the inner game versus the outer game and what needs to go on in your mindset and your beliefs, and there obviously has to be your ability to find those solutions, and you have to have that experience to do it. But a lot of it starts internally, and those decisions that we make every day.
Interesting. Yeah. So you knew what you were kind of getting into
Right.
before your partner asked you to step into the CEO. So what did you feel like knowing that? Then what did you feel needed to be true inside for you to accept that, to be able to say, okay, I'll do it.
You know, I still remember when he asked me to do it. So my partner, he lives up in Rexburg, and he's not here, where our corporate offices are. And so I had been running the business kind of on my own for, I mean, it's been over a decade now. And I remember he drove down for some executive meetings that day, and he asked me to come meet him. Let's go meet for breakfast over here, and I want to talk to you for a little bit before we get into our meetings that day with some of the other executives and leaders in our company. And I thought, well, he's one of my best friends, and I thought, it's kind of unusual. Usually we just come in and get to going. I knew he was driving down. He would drive down for the day back then, and and anyway, he asked me to meet him for breakfast, and it was early, and so I thought, okay, let's go meet. And that's where he kind of dropped the bomb, I guess you could say, on me, where he said, Josh, we have spent many many years trying to hire the right leadership and the right CEOs to help take us to where we want to go with Achieve today. And he said, I've realized after thinking about this a long time that you have the ability to do what we've been searching for, and you have been doing it for many many years. He's like, we need to put you in that role. And to answer your question, it felt like a bomb because I did know what I was getting into, um and I didn't want it.
Mm,
I didn't want that. I like to be able to focus on all the needs of the company. I was more of in an operational type role, and so I had my hands in everything, but um, but I didn't really want that position at all. And like I said, I had never envisioned that as something I would ever do or ask to do. And when he asked me to do it, it was something where you kind of have that moment of reality hitting you, and all of the weight you almost feel instantly. Um, the impact and the people that are going to look at you a little bit differently and some of those things. And so, yeah, it was quite humbling. I'm still humbled by it. I mean, that was 6, 7 years ago now. A lot has happened since then, but I'm still humbled by it every day, and it's been quite a journey.
Yeah, that's great. You mentioned weight. I hear a lot of CEOs talk about that word. And sometimes yeah, expectations can lead to a lot of that. And we mentioned you guys have won been in the top workplaces in Utah since 2015, if my research was right. How much of that external recognition adds to that weight that you might feel internally?
That's there's a lot of weight with that. I think more so it's more the day to day, the operational side of things. Like it's seeing your employees face to face and what they're dealing with and the challenges that they face. And I tend to, I don't know, maybe I allow myself to be more, I guess, connected to them because I played so many roles in the growth of the company. I sat in many of their seats
Mhm,
over the last 13 years at Achieve Today, but then also previously in the same space, but for other education companies.
mhm,
And so I understand what they go through, and I think having that experience and being on the front lines like many of them are, I recognize the effort that goes in every single day, the sacrifices that they have to make in order to see success in the different roles that they play in, and knowing it on that deep of a level, I think that's where the weight comes from because I feel this tremendous responsibility to make sure that I'm able to provide them with a place where they can continue to, make a paycheck and provide for their families. And I know a lot of their families. We do a lot of, corporate events, and we have them come here to our corporate office. We've got, out back here behind me, we've got you know, a big park and yard and barbecues, and we do a lot of things where we get to meet the families. And I think for me, it's recognizing the role that we all play and how we need to keep it moving forward because we support so many families.
mhm,
So that's a big part of it. I don't know if the accolades and the awards and the recognitions, those just feel like a bonus, and it's something that I have to say I'm a little, you feel a little bit of pride with that. Each year they're all, we get nominated for those by our employees, and every year I wonder, are we going to get it again? Did we, have I been able to maintain the culture that hopefully our employees will, nominate us in one of these things again? And I never know until it happens. But it's something that, we have been very proud of. But I think the weight comes from a different side of the
different.
business than those things. That's just
Okay.
a bonus that makes you feel like, okay, we're doing something that matters, that's
Mm.
helping.
Oh, that's great. Um, I'd like to talk about your book for a minute. So the title of the book starts with CEOs and suicide, right? So it's not a subtle title. Um, you've been very upfront about some of the, challenges that come with that weight. What made you decide, to be that bold about it and not have, that the quiet version of that conversation wasn't worth having?
I I kind of knew this question would come, and I hadn't I I hadn't really thought of what the best answer would be in public. Truthfully, John, you're the first person that I ever allowed to see a copy of the book, um, and it's something that I have kept very private. It's something that I'm not super proud of. Some of those, those low lows that have happened in my career and in the position, and you know, talking about it, again, this is the first, podcast that I have been on that I plan to be on to talk about it. And so, um, it is something that's been very difficult to talk about because there's a couple reasons I think, and it's because Number one, when you're in a role like this, a position like this, people expect a certain, confidence, and that everything needs to be put together right, and that, they can follow you anywhere. And I always worried as I thought about telling this story that that getting out there would diminish, that view of me as a leader. And so that was a big fear, to kind of go back to your question. Um, but how I came to put it together was, it was something that I had been thinking about it for years, because this experience that I went through, that I discussed in the book, it was many, many years ago now. And I spent many years with it inside, not talking to anyone about it.
Hmm.
And when you're in a role like this, you tend to find yourself in rooms with other executives and other CEOs of other, big companies here in Utah and across the country. To be honest, there's
Hmm.
some mastermind groups that I'm a part of, some big ones that have some very high level leaders and thought leaders in it. And one thing that I found was, as I would go to these, some of them are in, Florida, for example, or other states, and I'd sit in these rooms, and many of the people there, we know each other. We get together and meet every 6 months or so, and we discuss different things with our business. And this side that I talk about in the book is obviously, well, maybe not so obviously, but it's not something that my personality was ever to talk about. I certainly would not talk about it, and so I held these things really, really close and very personal. And I found, as I sat in some of these rooms, that I would hear other CEOs and other executives that were probably much better at sharing their feelings and much more vulnerable than I like to be. Um, they would talk about dealing with similar challenges and finding themselves in very dark places. And I would hear hints of people dealing with some of the things that I was, or that I had dealt with in the past, that put me in, probably one of the darker points of my life, of my career. And I think it was that, John, that, here, and it wasn't a one-time thing where I heard it and I'm like, "Oh, boom, I need to write a book about this." It was over the course of years where I would sit in these rooms and I would hear people talk about these experiences or these challenges or how they dealt with it. And it took me a while to realize, man, there's a lot of us that are dealing with this weight. They're really struggling. And I think I think it was really that, John, that got me to a point where, over a period of years, it took a very long time, and like I said, I'm still not totally comfortable with it, but I just felt like I need to get this out. I need to get the story out. There might be someone that it can help. Maybe it saves someone's life. Maybe it just helps a lot of others, which I've heard since now are dealing with the same challenges. And I thought, maybe there's some people that it can transform their leadership and their lives, and maybe save some. I will say this, that there were two final catalysts that happened. One was one of my coaches here. I mean, we're a coaching company. We're an education company. We coach over 1,400 one-on-one sessions a week. And one of the groups of coaches that we have is mindset, personal development, high performance leadership coaches.
Hmm.
And one of my coaches I've worked with for over 20 years now. His name's Adam, and I, he was talking to me about one of his students, and how he was telling them they needed to share their story and write a book. And he still doesn't know this, by the way. I haven't shared this with him. He's obviously going to find out now. I mean, assuming this book gets to his hands, but um, uh, he had commented some things to me about how he had told his student, "You need to get this story out. It's going to make a difference." And as he stood here in this office, and told me this, I just had this feeling. And like I said, this has been building up over years. And I thought, man, I'm hearing my own coach, my own
Yeah.
employee, telling me I need to do this. And then in tandem, a few days later, I had a CEO that I respected at a very high level, a phenomenal person, actually a very good friend that was one of our customers. Achieve Today worked with their business, and he had made a decision to step out of his company as the CEO. And he told me in private that he was dealing with a lot of uh, deep challenges, like this, emotional challenges, the weight of the position. And he's like, I can't keep doing this. And it was really in those, those couple things happening within a few days where I thought, I need to do this. And again, I'd been thinking about it for years, but I didn't have the courage to do it. I thought that, this is a bad idea. I shouldn't share that I've been going through this. And so I already kind of had things that I felt like I wanted to share in my mind, but I wasn't willing to do it until these couple things happened, and along with the couple years of those experiences. And I thought I just need to do it so I can get it done and get it out of my system. I will say, kind of as a side note, um, the other thing that really held me back that I struggled with too was I'm the owner and CEO of a personal development company. Mindset. I mean, what could be worse than the owner and CEO of a mindset company saying openly that he dealt with a very difficult mindset challenges, limiting beliefs, right? Negative thought patterns, all the things that we coach thousands of people on, tens of thousands of people on, and transform their lives. I thought this could destroy the company. And so anyway, that hopefully that articulates a little bit of the challenges, the ups and downs that I went through in writing this, and then actually going as far as saying, okay, let's get this published and
Yeah.
get it out there. It was really that balance of, do I risk, what are the risks, and are the people that it might help, is it worth those risks? And I just did it, obviously, and hopefully that was the right decision. Hopefully
Yeah.
it helps someone.
I don't know. I think it's inspiring, right? I mean, because it takes a big degree of courage, not only just to, to tell your own story, um, but also, like you said, there's risk associated with that. So it's not as if, there's no chance of, this changing the way people perceive you and that kind of thing. But, I've seen, I don't know. I'll be interested to see how it plays out. I know personally, I have examples of things like that where I feared the outcome and was surprised at how, yeah, I was surprised at the reception.
Yeah.
It took me, I think people want to follow somebody who's human. And whether you own a coaching company or you're a coach like me, right? You're still a human. Yeah, I don't know. Thank you for that. That was a really deep answer. Yeah, that I think that really showed a lot of vulnerability in and of itself. So thanks for that breakdown. Um, in your book, you talk a lot about, the loneliness that comes from kind of you described it as the circle of safe honesty. Like the number of people that you can really share the real stuff with as you go up in the organization gets smaller and smaller. Um, I wonder, like, when that was happening to you, what did you tell yourself at the time?
You know, it's like I said, there's two things that people see, right? There's the leadership side. Well, it goes back to what I said about inner game versus the outer game. Excuse me. And I think that's really that's really what we go through as leaders, right? You know, I tend to be more of an open book for the most part. It may not sound that way, with the way that I've explained this, but with our employees, I tend to be very open with where the business is headed and what we're going through and some of those things. But sometimes as a leader, you have to be conscious of the things you can share and the things that you shouldn't share. And I think any leader recognizes that. The challenge is knowing where to draw that line, and where to be open and vulnerable, and which is usually a very good thing to be. Like you said, it helps build trust, and it helps people want to follow you, to follow you to battle. And uh, and I think that's important. But there are certain things that I've learned that you need to keep kind of behind that wall. And I think that's part of what made it, uh, in this book, and the experiences that I shared. I think that's part of uh, what made it even worse was there's some things that you keep internal, and that you don't feel like you should or could share. And I think that's really what made it difficult and challenging, and even heavier, this is something that's on me that I have to deal with, that I have to solve on my own. I'm alone in this. That's how it felt. And there's nobody coming to save me. There's nobody coming to save our company. If it's going to be, if we're going to find a solution, if we're going to get through this, it has to be me. And I found that as things got worse in the business, years and years ago, and as we were going through those challenges that I describe in the book, that you know um, that's a part of the growth as a leader, that you come to find that there's nobody coming to save you, and you've got to figure it out. And that contributes to that weight. Is if it's going to be, it's up to me, right? I've got to figure this out and make it happen, and put on that positive face, because if your employees know that it's that difficult for you, how are
Yeah.
they going to follow you? How are they going to come into
Right.
work the next day and have belief in our company vision and where we're going, and the good things that are going on? And so oftentimes you have to put that on, and
Mm.
that lead with courage, and help show people where you're going.
Yeah, it seems, in the book you described kind of you found the way out. The way out you described was the kind of two-person rule. Like find the person that you can let in, right? And really talk to, about what's really going on.
Yeah.
Um, what did it feel like for you when you finally let someone in?
Um, it was a relief. You feel like it does help you not feel like you're alone all the way. And for me, someone like me, again, sharing those feelings and those challenges has never been easy for me. It still isn't. Um, but I'm probably a little bit better at it. Heck, the fact that I'm even having this conversation with you is shocking to me. Even it's obviously it's uncomfortable, but at the same time, um, I think having that other person that you can talk to, and that could be a coach like you, that could be a family member like your spouse, that could be your partner, like I talked about in my book. And for me, that's where it happened, and it happened without him knowing it, initially, and actually for quite a few years after. But yeah, I think to answer that question, it's you feel a little bit of that pressure. For me, there was this constant tightness in my chest, and stress and anxiety, and just the day to day, just this heavy. I don't know how else to explain it besides weight, like you've
Yeah.
said. And you kind of feel a little bit of that through relief
Mhm.
when you have that person that you can confide in, that you can talk to, that can kind of hear some of the challenges and help you hopefully find a solution, so that you don't feel like you're alone.
Yeah. I don't know who said it, but it sounds apt for this situation. It said a problem shared is a problem half solved.
That's
Even
great.
when you haven't, even when nothing's changed, like sometimes it does just help to get it out. Um,
Yeah,
hmm. um, yeah, we're coming up on time, and I want to ask you one more thing. And it's not really a question for me. It's really for somebody who might be listening to this in their car at 6 in the morning and wondering if anybody is feeling the way they feel right now. Um, for somebody who's like that, who's playing that invisible game right now, and feeling alone or doing it alone, what's one thing you wish someone had said to you before you had to figure it out the hard way?
yeah, you're not alone. I think that's the thing, and not only that, but that knowledge has helped me get to the point where I was even vulnerable enough and willing to write this book. But I think that's really the key. Is I felt, and many of these other leaders, like I said, that I have heard over the years. Um, I think a lot of us feel like that we're alone, and we don't have to be. A lot of us are dealing with it, and I mentioned in the book, one of the CEOs that I had worked with and got some coaching through long before this experience happened, had shared some experiences with me, and he was over a company that was worth billions, with a B, and he made a comment to me, and I share this experience in the book as well, but that the challenges you're dealing with in your company, and I had 60 to 80 employees. We're not big at all by any means, but he commented that the challenges you're dealing with are the exact same challenges that I'm dealing with as well. Just add a few zeros to to your financials, to your numbers. And I found that really, um, I guess, comforting. It's something I've looked back on over the years when, when I feel stressed or feel like, you know, maybe no one else is dealing with these challenges. I've had to learn over, decades, like you mentioned, of my career, that many of us are dealing with the same things, the same challenges. People on the outside don't realize it. They see these big office buildings like I'm sitting in here and at Achieve, and they see these, companies that you hear all the great stories about these businesses. It's the first 10 years of the business that nobody writes about. They don't write
Right.
magazine articles about the first, the working out of your garage, or some of these difficult times that I went through, or that many of us are going through. The stories aren't usually about that, and that's kind of why I wanted to write this. Was it hopefully helps people realize that it's not about the stories that people see. I just finished about an hour ago. We had we do a company meeting every month where all of our employees come here in our office, and there's awards given out and prizes and vacations and all these things. And that's the fun part that everybody sees. And here's our goals and our targets and our objectives, and how many students' lives we've changed. But it's what's going on, like the name of your podcast, The Untold, of what goes on behind the scenes. And to go full circle back to your question, um, it's those things that happen behind the scenes, the untold stories that make the biggest differences in our lives, that inner game that we all deal with. And I think if we all recognize that we're not in this alone,
Mm.
and that there are people out there that care, that can help us along the way, um, that it doesn't have to be as difficult as maybe it was for me, for example. And we're all in this together.
Yeah, man, that's, thank you for the plug, by the way. I appreciate that. But yeah, it's interesting in your business and in my business too. I'm sure we see a lot of those same things, right? Same challenges, same issues that come up. And in many cases, right, it boils down to as simple as, um, people are people, and we all have some of the same challenges, the same motivations, the same hopes and dreams, and the same, you know, weaknesses, right? The same vulnerabilities and challenges and doubts, right? And those kinds of things. So really great answer. And thank you so much for spending time with Untold today and being so open and courageous and vulnerable today. Yes, thank you. This is Josh Christopherson, CEO of Achieve Today. Thank you so much. And listeners, when you hear this, go find his book, CEOs and Suicide, The Invisible Game of Leadership. It's out now when this podcast airs, so go find it. Great story. I'm sure that you'll see aspects of yourself in the story. So this was a great episode of Untold. Thanks, Josh, for being with us tonight.
Thanks, John.